I mentioned this in one of our earlier podcasts, but when I was a student of Leonard Campagno's back in the late 1980s, he had like I think most of the only known river sharks at the time, the Gangeticus. He was working on Garrickeye to describe it at the time, and then so he had pretty much all the known species, and at this time we thought they might be extinct because at that point he'd been through India, he'd been to the Ganges River, the Hooghly. I think he'd been through Indonesia, but they didn't have as much going on. Like again, he was there probably back in the early to mid 80s, and at the time of working on it, there just wasn't really much more material around, and they actually thought this thing was extinct. And I mentioned that because like the work you've been doing, Pete Kine's been doing, and Julia, it's kind of cool. These things are actually, if you know where to find them, from what I can tell, they're kind of common.
Yeah.
Maybe common's the right word, but it was.
Well, I mean, I guess two things. I think the more we understand these animals, they just sit in this tight salinity band, and you need a big tidal river that's really turbid, going to sorting anywhere from 10 to 25 parts per thousand, and if they're there, you'll find them. So, yeah, I think our understanding is getting to a point that they probably do not use fresh water, like fresh water, certainly beyond the tidal reaches or anything, sharks. And then the adults have always been the enigma. I mean, like back in 2006, you could almost count the number of known river sharks in Australia on two hands. Like there was just hardly any observations because they didn't get caught in the inshore fisheries. And if they did, they probably got mis-ID'd. So they were just, it was just really strange. And then, some of the work Pete Kine did, I guess they kind of zoned in on, okay, they're in the estuary and they don't leave the estuary. And some of the microcam work we've been doing on the vertebrae indicates that the adults don't really leave the estuary either. Juveniles are upper estuary, adults lower estuary. Very little indication of fresh water.